Good afternoon, and thank you for all of you that have participated in the Homes Within Reach virtual conference over the past few days. We hope that you have had an opportunity to learn, connect, and be engaged. In today's session, we're going to be talking about navigating resources through COVID-19 as it relates to housing and to those that are renting properties, and how that impact has affected them and what resources are available for those people out in the community. The CARES Act was the largest economic relief package in U.S. history. It increased existing resources as created new resources. This required a massive mobilization and rollout of additional staffing and programs to support the people navigating the rapidly expanding systems to help people in crisis and meet the most basic of their needs. So today we ask you to join us for some creative solutions within the communities in Pennsylvania that were developed, excuse me, to help support people in navigating this new sea of COVID-19 resources. My name is Ernest Campbell. I reside in Collegeville, PA, and I am the market manager for Wells Fargo Home Mortgage in the state of Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. And my job is actually on the mortgage origination side, but we also know that there's been a huge impact to those homeowners out in the marketplace as well. So I've been asked to moderate today's panel with some outstanding individuals who are doing a lot of great work within the community. So today we have with us Elisa Barada. Elisa is the executive director at Third Street Alliance. Elisa's been in the industry for about 30 years, working with nonprofits that support housing. We also have with us Carol Hardiman. She's the executive director of Hill Street Consensus Group. Carol's a dedicated community activist with more than 20 years of experience in managing public and community affairs. And then we also have with us Ryan Hoffman, who's a project manager with Create Lab. Ryan is a specialist in data and building data to build a compelling narrative and implementing data projects in educational settings. So we have a various variety of experience on today's call. And I will just start off by saying, you know, at Wells Fargo, we take pride in being able to help our consumers and try to lead the industry in that. We too had to make a lot of adjustments during COVID from not only a standpoint of helping those homeowners who have mortgages with us, but also those small business owners who were looking to get PPP funding, I should say. And we obviously didn't have the resources set up to help both of those groups. We haven't faced a crisis like this in some time, maybe 2009 and 2010. So we had to redirect our resources to be able to do that. I would just say across the country, we had over 1 million homeowners who were impacted by COVID and applied for forbearance and were granted forbearance. So you think about that, that was an opportunity for them to miss their mortgage payments from 3 to up to 12 months. We have some folks that are still active. I believe throughout the country, we still have 317,000 families who are still in some sort of forbearance. So even 8, 9, 10 months later, there are still families that are being impacted, and we don't expect that number to dial down anytime soon. So on the Wells Fargo home front, that's what we've been doing to be a strong supporter of those that have been impacted by COVID. And I'm interested to hear what these other advocates on the call have been doing, and I hope you are looking forward to hearing from them as well. So without further ado, I believe we're going to kick it off to Elisa to get us started. Elisa, I'll hand it off to you.
Wonderful, and thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that I can take people through a slideshow real quick. So I work at Third Street Alliance in Eastern Pennsylvania, and I also co-chair the Lehigh Valley Regional Homeless Advisory Board. I'm going to talk today about the eviction prevention work we started earlier before COVID and how it was really built out a little bit more effectively through the COVID era and with a number of COVID resources, and then talk a little bit about where we're going from here and what other resources we're trying to bring to the table. I do want to say, because there was such a massive release of federal stimulus dollars in response to the COVID crisis, we keep thinking of this as the COVID crisis. But the reality is the people that we serve really are dealing with crises related to eviction and living at the margins and at risk of poverty and homelessness all the time. So it's part of our responsibility to make sure that we advocate for federal allocations and strategies really designed to prevent and end homelessness above and beyond this COVID crisis. Because just because there's this crisis that we're calling COVID doesn't mean the housing and homelessness crisis isn't a daily reality for many people. So that's my little spiel about that. As we move forward, when we started our plan back in 2019, we had applied for a grant from Home for Good to begin a planning process for a prevention program. And we really focused on using the National Alliance to End Homelessness key principles related to homeless prevention. This was a collaborative project that allowed us to really put a framework down through which our reaction to COVID was really built. There were 6 provider agencies involved in this project: Catholic Charities, Easton Area Neighborhood Center, Lehigh Conference of Churches, New Bethany Ministries, Project of Easton, and Third Street Alliance. In addition, there were many other members from our Regional Homeless Advisory Board who provided us with advice, feedback, and all kinds of supports as we began planning our eviction process and then moving in to help us really assist the build out of the eviction process as it addressed COVID. So our planning took into account a bunch of tools that we had available. The ALICE data from United Way's Greater Lehigh Valley, which really looked at people who were asset limited and income constrained. We looked at a landlord survey that we did for the landlords that were in the Lehigh Valley Regional Homeless Advisory Board's rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and voucher programs. We were able to really talk to landlords to figure out what their needs were. And back in 2019, April of 2019, 30% of the units had were behind on their rent, and 16% owed more than 1 month's rent. So the rental crisis was already kind of in motion at that point in time. And every landlord we talked to was interested in learning more about and potentially participating in our eviction prevention program. So we had some additional data from the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. I'm going to show you a quick map that they provided when they did their planning process. Okay, it's coming up real quick. So they did a whole bunch of work in the local community around people who were rent burdened. They identified the foreclosure risks. They were able to say how many households were cost burdened, how many of those were tenant households, and how many were owner households in the Lehigh Valley. And above and beyond this, they were able to provide a map of the Lehigh Valley that really identifies in this dark blue. This is the percentage of cost burden rental households. The lighter blue are 60%, the darker blue 80 to 100% cost burden. So to me, that's a critical issue that we need to be paying attention to and be able to look at not just the cities of Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, but also these rural areas that people were facing rent issues. So that to me was one of the critical pieces that we really had to be paying attention to. So next, as we go through COVID, right? Suddenly there's COVID in March 2020. We knew it was coming. We were doing a little work around how were we going to be responsive to it. But at that point in time, we could really say 21,500 residents applied for unemployment in March. And at one point in time, 14% of our working population was unemployed. So that was a critical issue for the Lehigh Valley. We knew that low-income households are disproportionately affected. They have little savings to pay for rent, utility, and basic needs. We were also finding that middle-income households were definitely being affected. And then suddenly landlords struggling to pay mortgages, utility, taxes, and emergency repairs. So the crisis isn't just hitting renters, it's also hitting the landlords and the homeowners. Our desire around the eviction prevention program was really to work with tenants to be able to develop a plan for the payment of rental arrears. We wanted landlords to be able to respond to the proposals without the cost burden of going to court and scheduling an eviction. We wanted to be able to provide some pre-court counseling, and we wanted to be able to work with magisterial district judges to allow them to refer folks. So this was the process that we wanted to put in place. So we worked together, 6 providers, to come up with common documentation and a process. The reality was that that first phase was taking place during the eviction moratorium in Pennsylvania, but we knew we'd need additional resources to the table and additional cooperation. At that point in time, probably back in April, May, we were looking at trying a goal of about $500,000 per county. So the counties of Lehigh and Northampton. We had our Home for Good dollars committed. We had some ESG money committed. We got some money from a community response fund. But yet at that point in time, we did not know about the city and county resources related to CARES, ESG, CDBG, and then eventually the PHFA money. We also knew we needed to bring the court systems to the table to work with us. So at that point in time, we began to do some outreach to the courts. We emailed the president judges from both Lehigh and Northampton counties, requesting them to assign someone to work with us. We held organizing conference calls and got feedbacks from the court representatives, and eventually had both judges, magisterial district judges, and the MDJ administrators involved in our process and giving us feedback around our documentation about how we were going to interact with the court system, how could we interact with the landlords. They also worked with us in terms of some of our language for the process, so that it would be clear that it was reflective of the eviction law in Pennsylvania. So we got a lot of cooperation from them, and it was really made all the difference to moving this process forward. During this process, as we were negotiating and kind of working with the court teams, we had the PA eviction order in place. We had some local eviction action orders from the court judges. And then finally, the CDC order fell into place. So at that point in time, we knew we probably wouldn't be looking at people who are at imminent risk of eviction for financial reasons. The only reason they would be looking at eviction was for non-financial reasons. So the court process really was that the landlord and tenants would receive notice from the magisterial district court. So whenever a landlord would go in to potentially file an eviction, they would get documentation and they could self-refer to us, or their tenants could refer to us. We had common sets of documentation, and through the process, the PHFA documentation was critical to us to be able to move this forward. We also looked at how do we develop payment plans and what resources would be available, from what tenants may have available to what was available through PHFA and potentially other streams of funding. At that point in time, I'm sorry, let me go back up real quick. At that point in time, with the release of the PHFA money and the CARES dollars, we had new partners coming in who were managing the dollars: Lehigh County Area Agency on Aging and Northampton County Department of Community and Economic Development and Department of Human Services. So in the Lehigh Valley, we have 2 counties that are really, they have their separate systems and ways of doing things. So in addition to the magisterial court systems, which have about 14 courts in each county, so that was 28 courts, we also have the different county structures that we were bringing to the table and collaborating with. In addition, we had 2 other providers who came to the table, not necessarily to provide financial assistance, but CACLV was providing counseling for tenants undergoing financial hardship, and North Penn Legal Services for counseling with tenants with non-financial issues related to the lease. So those folks who are looking at other concerns related to eviction. The providers came together and did a really good public relations and social media campaign. This slide really shows one of the pieces that we put out on social media related to rental assistance and what was available to folks. We did common press releases, common social media posts. We pitched stories to reporters and had newspaper stories, articles in the Morning Call and Lehigh Valley Express Times on a number of occasions. We had features on WFMZ and our local PBS station, as well as radio stuff. We did presentations to our private funders, including corporations and foundations. We did presentations to the elected officials, and we did presentations to a whole bunch of local businesses to get the word out to both landlords and tenants that this resource was available. Outcomes as of December 31st. In Northampton County, we were able to manage about $1.5 million in rental assistance through PHFA, CDBG, and CARES money. We also began to move into some utility assistance. We worked with over 350 landlords and 400 tenants. In Lehigh County, rental assistance through PHFA was $1.3 million, 200 landlords and 150 tenants. There is additional money out there. I was just unable to get the final number on that. So the end result, we were able to keep some households who were impacted by COVID-19 economically dislocation stably housed. However, we know that there are over 900 cases that have been filed in eviction court in Lehigh County since June of 2020. We're still waiting for the numbers in Northampton County, so we don't have that data yet. We do know that evictions for reasons that are other than non-payment of rent are proceeding. And we know that there are several landlords who are forcing tenants out of their rental units because they'll be selling the building and they're trying to vacate the buildings. So evictions and move outs are still moving forward, and that's putting a whole bunch of stress on our homeless services program. So what's next for us in all of this? Because we're getting stress on our program, we're also looking at how do we use COVID-19 CARES money for non-congregate sheltering in the winter and for landlord engagement to build out our landlord, the landlords who are participating in our subsidized housing and voucher programs. For non-congregate shelter in the winter, we're really looking at funding that is going to be available for hotel stays and Airbnbs for families who have been evicted and are literally homeless. We're also working whenever possible with our local human services departments to make sure that we can take advantage of other additional funding that may be available there. And then we're trying to build out our landlord network, as I said. We have, as I showed you in a previous slide, we probably have over 500 landlords with thousands of units who are in the Lehigh Valley, and we're hoping that we can strengthen our relationship with them so that we become the first place they come when they have an available unit, and we are able to pull people off the queue from rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and voucher programs and get them into those housing. So that's one of the things that's the next step that we want to build out from this COVID time period. But one of the most critical issues we're really looking at in the Lehigh Valley is the lack of affordable rental housing. It was a huge need pre-COVID. Post-COVID, it's even worse. And particularly for landlords who haven't been getting payment and are concerned about their ability to pay their own mortgage and keep their properties going, we see that there could be a loss of what we had considered our available affordable units. So that's a big challenge for us. So I want to talk real quick about some lessons learned. While we were doing this program, one of the things we learned, of course, is that progress only happens at the rate of trust. we had to build relationships above and beyond the relationships we had in our normal day of, business. We were working with 6 providers when we started the process back in 2019. We grew to accommodate relationships with the counties at all levels in terms of the county government, and also with the court system. We had to build huge relations with the MDJ judges, and then we also had to build relationships with landlords and tenants who wanted to trust us to help them work through this process. And that partnership mattered at all levels of the agency. It wasn't just the executive directors who were coming together to do planning. It was the case managers. It was the case managers providing direct support to the MDJ offices when they had questions and needed assistance. It was the MDJs who were reaching out to the landlords and tenants and encouraging them to participate. So the partnership was really critical. And I can say that the time that it took for us between March and July to really build out these relationships made all the difference in the world to our being successful. So it was regular communication between meetings and reporting out to everybody on where we were. Common processes and documentation sped our process along, but it really took a while to get buy-in. So we were going back and forth. If you can imagine 6 nonprofit agencies, each with their own intake process or their process for managing paperwork and reporting out on it, how do we come together with common documentation and process? So that took a while. And it took a while to make sure that we were interacting with the effective documentation that the counties needed. We needed everybody to have a good elevator pitch so they could tell the story time and time again to get everybody on the same page, and to make sure that when we were on social media, when we were talking to funders, and when we were talking to reporters, we had a story that everybody could understand easily. And finally, we want to make sure that we continue to build on the success that we started for long-term impact. So that's where our landlord engagement process is moving forward. We hope to be able to use available stimulus dollars into the future for this, but we also hope that we'll be able to attract some quality private support from foundations and corporations as well. So that is my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan and Carol in just a minute. And if you guys have questions, you can hit me up via the chat. Thank you.
All right, wonderful. So I guess Carol and I will jump in now. As Ernest said, my name is Ryan Hoffman. I'm from the Create Lab at Carnegie Mellon University. And Carol, you can introduce yourself as well. Oh, you're muted, Carol.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, my name is Carol Hardeman, and I'm an executive director for the Hill District Consensus Group, which we work on a lot of housing and human rights, and the same things that Elisa has been working on. And so we didn't want to, I guess, do the same thing because our story is similar to Elisa. So we have a presentation that the CMU Create Lab has been helping the consensus group tell the narratives about housing discrimination, displacement, and eviction. So Ryan's going to be my tech person, and I'm going to be the narrative. And I just want everyone to know that I'm not ignoring you, but I'm working on another screen. So ready, Ryan?
Yeah, let me say one thing about the presentation tool we're using. So this tool is called Earth Time. It's from the Create Lab at Carnegie Mellon University. It's a big data visualization tool. So at earthtime.org, it's a great way to tell stories. So that's another thing we're showing in this presentation. It was traditionally used to tell stories about climate change and refugee migration and all these kind of global issues. And then in partnership with Carol's organization and other local organizations, we started visualizing census data and some of the data you're going to see on the presentation today to tell local stories and hopefully advocate for local change. So without further ado, go ahead, Carol.
Sure. I also want to say the name of our story is called Homes Not Within. And I hope I don't offend anyone with the title, since the conference is called Homes Within. We just want to tell our story in the way we did the research and the data. So to begin, this story will explore the barriers to home ownership in Pittsburgh for the most part. And the story also relates to redlining and, as I said, displacement and the beginning of public housing, and as well, the disappearance of public housing as well. Next, Ryan. So, of course, everyone has the same story in every city, right? Everything's just not isolated to Pittsburgh and Lehigh Valley and so on. But we're going to basically speak to Pittsburgh because it speaks to all the cities and the states across the United States. So I want to start with redlining, which was a map that was created in 1937 by the Homeowner Loan Corporation, which in particular in Pittsburgh, they divided Pittsburgh into green and blue areas, and Ryan will illustrate that. But as you can see, all the areas that are outlined in red are the areas that were meant for new development and basically the start of displacement.
Yeah, so you can see on this map, like for those of you familiar with Pittsburgh, the red areas were deemed hazardous, and as Carol said, meant for new development. So that would mean we're gonna tear down what's there and build new things. So you can see like what was designated as best areas as this legend up here. You have parts of Oakland, Shady Side, Squirrel Hill, and then you have the Hill District, the North Side, Lawrenceville at the time, parts of the Strip, South Side, designated as hazardous. So that's where the city would have to tear down what's there and redo the development. And now we're going to turn to the Hill.
So in the mid-50s, the redlining of homes were in Pittsburgh, which made the way for Civic Arena, which is now the PPG Arena, better also known as where the Pittsburgh Penguins play. And so in the 50s, I guess it redlining did not only make way for the Civic Arena development, it also had the 279 highway that ran directly through the lower hill. But out of that, over 1,800 people were displaced, which we did know as the lower hill, but we now call it the 28 acres. And then 67% were people of color and 32% were white. But however, over 1,000 people of color moved into public housing, which at that time was, and it still is, managed by the City of Pittsburgh Housing Authority, while white families moved into other areas such as Polish Hill, Squirrel Hill, and surrounding suburbs. And so Brian's going to pinpoint where the segregation began, and out of all of this harm, African Americans did not enjoy the same home ownership opportunities because of all this breakup and new development.
Exactly. And I'm going back to this redlining map, just so we can. So again, we were looking at the Hill District right here, designated hazardous. As Carol was saying, families with more means at the time, often white families, had the mobility to move to places designated either green or blue, best or still desirable. So before I go to the next slide, if we can take a look at this map and say, okay, let's look at the red areas, the areas designated as hazardous. And the next slide I show is going to be racial segregation in Pittsburgh in the 1990s. And we'll notice some patterns here with the way this map looks versus the way this map looks. So this map is of US race in 1990 census. So folks who identified as Hispanic, white, Black, Asian, or other race. And as you can see, the green, the neon green color is the Black population of Pittsburgh. The blue color is the white population. So the way some of this has played out is that if we see the areas designated as hazardous, it's not spot on, but that tends to be where the Black population of Pittsburgh was still living in 1990, and well before the next round of gentrification happened. This is what the city looked like. Should we move to public housing, Carol?
Sure. So as Ryan said, the green represents African Americans or people of color the most. But as you can see, people of color were segregated and lived in these pockets, and most of them were public housing pockets. And so now we're going to show you the disappearance of public housing, because although that happened probably in the 50s, by the 90s, people of color had started, building their business. We named the Center Avenue corridor, the corridor culture, just to hold on to the African-American experience. So by the 90s, the Housing Authority operated probably over 3,000 units of public housing across 20 major Pittsburgh neighborhoods. But however, by the mid-90s, we started to see the disappearance of public housing. And so, Ryan, you want to go to the next one?
Yeah, and what we're looking at here and what we're going to be looking at in these next couple are, if we see the subsidized housing. So the green is where there is subsidized housing. So these green circles are subsidized housing. And we'll see the timeline. We're in the year 1990. Now, as I hit play and the timeline moves on, we will see that the housing units either are privatized or they are closed. So just 1 second before we move on, so we can watch these housing units over time in different neighborhoods close. And Carol's going to get into what that meant for the people living there. So same deal here. We see these are public housing in the Hill District, and throughout from 1990 to the end of the timeline 2010, we see most of them close.
And also, when we speak of privatized housing, also that speaks to more your LIHTC and other, I would say Section 8 and other public housing subsidies. So Ryan is right. What we want to really pinpoint is a lot of that public housing, when it disappeared, it displaced a whole lot of African Americans. So you can go to the next slide. So here we're in the Hill District. Go back one. Okay, so here we're in the Hill District, and of course the Hill District had several public housing properties where people lived, became family, laid down roots. However, by the mid-90s, as I said, we started to see public housing units disappear. However, it became a trend. And when I say a trend, a lot of the folks were excited about new housing and new development. However, a lot of the closings of public housing, a lot of folks didn't come back as we always thought, or they hoped they'd come back. And so Aliquippa, I believe, lost over close to 2,000 units, and they shut down in 1995. However, another thing I want to pinpoint, when they bring these public housing units back, they changed the culture and the identity of what used to be there, because Aliquippa Terrace, as I know, and the people that lived in public housing know, is now Oak Hill. And same thing with Bedford Dwellings. I think Bedford Dwellings was closed, and it was the particular part about Bedford Dwellings and Aliquippa and Addison. They had other little names that people were familiar with. For instance, Bedford Dwelling included Francis Street, Whiteside Road, Chauncey Drive, which Chauncey Drive is still there, and Summers. So when Francis Street was torn down and then Whiteside Road was replaced, Whiteside Road came back, and it's now called Bedford Hill. And so I'm just trying to speak about how the identity in the neighborhood, the fabric of the neighborhood is lost once these units come back. Also, the harm in it, the families that are displaced, and more likely they don't get to come back. So you could show them in particular. St. Clair Village is another public housing group, but when St. Clair Village closed initially, it displaced a whole lot of people, but you could just see the disappearance of not only the units, but the disappearance of Black people in particular.
Yeah, so as we're saying, here's 1990, and you'll see, St. Clair Village is this pocket right here, and you'll see the large amount of people around it. And then I'm going to fast forward to 2010. And even up here, it thins out a little bit. So as Carol is saying, it's clear, at least in the St. Clair Village case, that this closing of this public housing displaced vast majority Black people, not white folks. We'll move on to a more modern example in East Liberty.
So East Liberty, the same thing in recent years, the Penn Plaza, which had over 312 units, their evictions disappeared, started displacement as well. And it started in 2015. It was demolished in 2017. Now the development is coming back. However, not all the people that was displaced from the particular area or Penn Plaza, as we know, will get a chance to come back. And so Ryan can show you, or can you show them East Liberty? Yeah. The disappearance of African Americans and basically poor people in general.
Yeah, and we don't have this on our presentation today, but if anybody was interested in talking about this afterwards or using this tool, we could also overlay income data, and we can overlay the changing demographics, and we can show that, yeah, people making under 30, 40,000 are, especially in East Liberty, being driven out of the community entirely. And as Carol likes to talk about, the median income's going up, and yeah, but that's a whole other story. But I just want to say there's more off each of these kind of branches of knowledge to go down.
Sure. So back to the Lower Hill, once the arena was initially demolished, the people of the Hill put a statue and some other things just to commemorate, just to acknowledge to people that we are still here. So we call that particular place Freedom Corner, and it's at the corner of Crawford Street and Center Avenue, meaning no development past here. So you could go to the next slide and you can show them why we feel this way. Because currently, right now, we have been going in negotiations with the Penns and URA and the city and everyone to, you know, include housing, affordable housing in the 28 acres, and also give people or the residents of the Hill and anyone the opportunity to live. But as you can see, this is the current plans that we're facing whenever, you know, the Penns or whoever decides to develop, but these are the new plans. Next slide. So in conclusion, you know, affirmative, furthering fair housing, I think it's good that we have the law. It just doesn't have enough teeth because, first of all, it's very hard to prove discrimination. And then, you know, I think the law can also provide better access for people to have housing, fair housing, affordable housing, and just housing options altogether. You know, I believe we have to work together on this if we want to build a better future for everyone, not just in Pittsburgh, but across this whole great nation, and make it all in for everyone and not just a few chosen people in particular because of race or their beliefs or who they are. And that's the end of our presentation. I did want to follow up with what we're doing in this COVID as far as our work. We've been partnering with a lot of partners, and of course our work was way before COVID, just as Alyssa has said. So this right now, we have this current program. It's free navigation services to emergency relief. And we are working on eviction prevention. We're doing it, trying to make some sense out of keeping people housed and relationships with landlords. And we're hoping that this money, the CARE Act funding, will come and help the community organizers and as well as the smaller organizers provide rent relief, because what we found the most, we helped probably over 2,000 people or more apply, but half of them didn't qualify for the funding for other reasons. And when we also found that there's no funding for social needs, meaning when our kids went back to school, half of our kids didn't have technology, meaning they didn't have computers, and the parents were facing eviction and they had to deal with that. And I think one of the biggest hurt piece is there's no real plan to rehouse people as what we first thought. I mean, the CDC order came in and it did what it was supposed to do, but it really wasn't enough because landlords were still moving forward to evict. And also a lot of magistrates weren't educated around renters' rights as what we would think. And they were moving to evict and not really even considering the rights of tenants. And so just moving forward without saying everything that Elisa has said, you know, we have been working on the ground forever, trying to make sense out of all of this to keep people from being displaced and to make this housing fair. And I think the lesson learned for me is most housing advocates they can't do it without the other advocates, meaning you need the food people, you need the healthcare people, you need the education people, you need the employment people to be centered around the people, because we're all serving the same people. And, it's really a domino effect around the people we serve, and the work is really connected. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you to Elisa and to Ryan for their deep dive and the presentation and the work that they are doing throughout the communities. I believe our CVent staff will be helping us field any questions and relaying those to the parties. As we talked about, I don't have the text chat, so maybe you guys can help me with next steps. It seems like we still got some time left, and I'm sure there's some questions of you.
So while we're waiting, I have a question for Carol
Sure.
and Ryan, actually. So the technology that you guys use to do these overlays, will you be able to go back and look at how people in the neighborhoods were impacted by COVID, both in terms of health and in terms of services available to them, so that you can get sort of that COVID resource around that?
Yes, we have data visualizations on evictions from COVID, and we have a lot of displacement data, and we also have just COVID data for the city, like, bubble maps over each neighborhood of where the COVID cases are rising, and hospitalizations and all those sorts of things. So it's basically, this tool can visualize any data that exists. So as long as, anyone out there who works in data or advocacy organizations who has data, who wants to represent the data and tell stories with it, that's the strength of the EarthTime tool.
Yeah, and it's a great tool. I have been working with the Create Lab for about 3 years now, because we host a renters' rights workshop, and also other programs around what we want to run when we want to run a campaign. And so we are putting, and actually we have our data for that with the Create Lab under a partnership with with another provider, actually Ryan's partner, and her name is Ann. And so Ann, she built our platform where we have a call center, and we're capturing data there. We're able to tell how many people we assisted for the CARES Act application, as well as how many people were really denied. We're able to tell the food resources, just like Brian said, we're able to tell that story around the presentation. And so we wanted to do this in particular because sometimes you have to go back to history. And it's like Alicia said, all of this was going on before COVID. And so we want to move forward to the future beyond COVID to make it, so that everyone will be able to have a livelihood, a home, whether they're a renter or a homeowner, and whether landlords and tenants, we want to help them engage as well and have better relationships. So this right here is for basically a call to action for better relationship building and transparency.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Keith, are there any questions out there for the group?
No, sir, Ernest, there hasn't been any yet.
That means they covered everything.
It looks like a blanket. Yeah.
Well, Steph, I don't know if you want us to give a few more minutes since we have the time, or if you want us to wrap up, because I know there are plenty of other sessions for those to attend. And if they've been on Zoom, they may need a break, a snack break or something.
Okay, she says, feel free to keep going we have a few more minutes. So
go ahead. While we were on the call, one of the things I did look up, since this call is specific to Pennsylvania, I know I mentioned some national numbers, it's tough for me to get that kind of data down to the state level. But, I said over 1 million homeowners had taken advantage of our forbearance program. Well, just in the state of Pennsylvania, we still have active about 15,000 homeowners who are still taking advantage of forbearance. And so this would be right now coming up on 10 months for those families. And I'm happy that they're able to take advantage. I just think what it could do for some homeowner to not have to pay their mortgage for 10 months because they've been impacted by their work or life balance situation. So again, we are still taking those candidates that meet the requirements for forbearance. They still can apply. They can just simply visit the Wells Fargo website to do that, to initiate that process if they haven't already. And that just lets you know, while some people feel like everything is back to normal, it's not. And I'm sure you guys see that probably more so than I do on the ground level, that this is by no means behind us as it pertains to how it's impacting our communities, homeowners, renters alike.
So Ernest, question around that. So you're, for the most part, talking about single family homeowners.
Correct, single family.
What are options for landlords whose tenants are not able to pay and who may or may not be able to access rental assistance? Are there resources in the banking community to assist those?
That was a good question. If that landlord is, maybe they have their business tied up in an LLC, then they would be considered a small business owner. They could apply for PPP funds because they're a small business owner. So they could receive help that way. But I don't know any other details. Like if I'm just a person who has one single family residence that I'm renting out, that'd be something I'd have to check on, but that's a great question.
Because we hear this all the time. Tenants are really, suffering greatly, but so many landlords are as well. And that means we're about to lose that affordable housing unit or units because they may be going into foreclosure on those.
Yeah, Steph, if you don't mind, I'll take that as a takeaway and try to get you some information back to share with the group on how do we handle, because from my understanding, I don't want to misquote here, but I think this is only for those that this is their primary residence, which of course would make sense. But you're right. The downstream effect to that is the tenant who's, maybe leasing from a landlord. So yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and I also see, since public has gone really private, that it's time for public to come back from private, because meaning that, the disappearance of public housing is now being put into private hands. And so there's no rehousing, there's no emergency housing whatsoever. And of course, when things are put into private, the playing field isn't the same. For instance, most of the people that we help that, want to live in public housing, they do an application over there, and then they go to the private side and they're vetted from the public housing, then they go over to private, and then they have to do a process there. Private wants them to have perfect credit. They want them to have all the things that public housing doesn't require, and there's no meeting of the minds. And so people are left on wait lists forever, trying to clean up their credit and trying to do other things that normally they don't have to do for public. And I think another thing too is there needs to be policies around certain things, because even now we're speaking of for landlords and tenants as well, and there's a lot of mediation programs, but meaning that we're helping people at the magistrate level, and the magistrates aren't well educated around tenants' rights. And I didn't know that you didn't actually have to have a law degree to be a magistrate. I never knew that. So most magistrates, when I'm, trying to help a tenant really stay or prevent eviction, the magistrates are openly saying, well, we didn't know that was affecting tenants in that kind of way. And I'm talking about in regards to their rights. you know, instead of them just, you know, trying to, and they're not mediate the problem, but let's face it, landlords have more rights than tenants. And so, you know, in particular, your bigger landlords, they show up to court with tons of lawyers. That's another thing. And so we've been working and advocating for a right to counsel, which is a legal system for tenants so that they can know about their rights, and also educating landlords, magistrates, and whoever around the process.
You know, Carol, that's really interesting because what I was going to say about this is COVID really exposed, you know, in a big way, so many flaws in the system that we saw kind of on a case by case basis, and suddenly we're seeing it en masse.
Yeah, it's not nothing new. This has been going on forever.
But now there's so much attention being paid to it, and people who never thought they would be in eviction court are now getting, you know, a real education around it. So hopefully this is some of the outcome that we can really begin to organize and say, how do we fix the gaps in the system so that these people aren't necessarily so at risk from housing to eviction? Like, where can we really focus some new resources and do that? And that's one of the things we've had some luck with, bringing, you know, funders to the table to talk about this, because, you know, they may have heard about it from one agency's grant proposal in the past. Now they're seeing it in the newspaper all the time, and you know, paying much more attention to where are the gaps.
And you know, another thing, Ernest, we have a lot of homeowners, and this is all before COVID. They've been coming to us as well because we're talking about rent relief and mortgage relief. And some of these homeowners are worked all their lives, paid their taxes all their life, and they can't get relief. And their houses are falling down as they try to social distance in their homes. And there's just a lot just going on that just really isn't right as far as housing being a human right, you know, or as far as human beings. And so there's been cases where some of the homeowners, they're in tangled titles, and they're in, I guess, crisis because they're caring for other people and they just don't have the cash or the ability to apply or even, you know, get what they call an equity loan. They don't even qualify because they don't have the credit. They don't have all this stuff that, from going back to redlining, when people were building wealth and enjoying equity, African-Americans in particular did not have that luxury. And so now all of it's like, you know, here on the table. So what do you do? In the middle of a pandemic, they're just losing their homes. And then outside of losing their homes, some of our residents, they want to go. They said they don't mind if they have to go to public housing. And I'm like, good luck with that if you feel like waiting, you know, the rest of your life for it.
Yeah, I think to all of your points that there's a lot that we can learn not only from this, but how do we move forward and how do we create sustainability. But I think that, you know, what you guys are doing together in your own silos is a good start. And I think, you know, the one point that I'll take away from the call is that we have to use our resources to connect with other resources, right? So you brought up a good point that, you know, it's a domino effect. You can't have one without the other. You can't talk about housing without talking about employment. Yep. You can't talk about healthcare without talking about food deserts.
All connected.
Like, all of those things go together. And since each of you, and there are other organizations that are touching a person, it makes no sense for 7 people to have to try to find that person when there should be a way that that person can come to one organization and find the other resources. So I guess, you know, I don't know if you two knew each other, you three knew each other before we participated in the 2 months of planning for this session, but I hope that you guys stay connected and have some cross-pollination in what you do. I think if anything, that'll be a big win for not only your organizations, but your constituents as well. So it's
Thank you.
1:59. I would like to just wrap up today's session and say thank you for all of you that had a chance to join. Thank you for this big Homes in Reach virtual conference. I can imagine what it looked like when it was face to face, but I know I've been blessed by having the opportunity to participate and to meet these wonderful folks and hear about the things they're doing in their community. And thanks to Steph and her team for inviting Wells Fargo to participate, and for Keith and his group for putting on a great virtual event. Have a great day. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, you too.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.